بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In the last few nights we tried to start by talking in generic terms about the start of the journey of Imam Hussein alayhi salam from Medina towards Karbala. We also touched upon the will that he wrote as the most important document stating the aims of his movement, and then we tried to relate it to our everyday life last night. Tonight, in a traditional sense, is a night where usually Muslim Aqeel is remembered. So I tried to mix tradition with some sort of modern touch and continue the topic that we were talking about, using Muslim Aqeel as a prime example of what are we talking or what are we aiming to achieve. We'll just shed some light on Muslim Aqeel as a person, and then we'll go back and relate it to the journey of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We have to remember that other than the 14 infallibles and the prophets, the rest of the people, yes, have different statuses, have different levels of piety, have different levels of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the end of the day, they are normal, ordinary human beings like every one of us. What sets them apart is what have they achieved in their lives. What they have achieved from either the stance or the most important stance they made in their lives, or what they have achieved from actually producing something unique for the human beings. Muslim Aqeel as a person, ignoring his blood relationships at the moment, was an ordinary man. There was nothing special about him from infallibility perspective. I'm not talking about from Iman perspective. Everything that he gained was acquired from within. What I'm trying to say is the environment he was brought up in was the perfect environment, one. Secondly, the experiences and the role models he had in his life were the perfect role models. And thirdly, the commitment that he gave himself to follow these role models was the perfect standing. So in other means, his parents produced a household, because let's not forget, while Aqeel was the brother of Imam Ali alayhi salam and the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, at the end of the day, he was a man of like any other man in Arabia at that time. But he chose to make his household in a way that it's always first connected to the Imam and to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So connected with Islam. So it's a life that you experience Islam in it. It's not a life where Islam is only in the mosque. It's not a life where you only, when you meet the Imam or when you go to visit the Imam or when you by any means read a book or open the Quran, then suddenly you remember you're a Muslim. But Islam was in a practice every single day. That's one. So that's, he owes it to his parents. Second thing that he possibly owes to his parents partially and owes it to himself primarily is the fact that he knew who to choose as his role model. So when he was living the life, he knew who to acquire from, who to learn from, who to follow, and who is his guide in everyday life. So every action he did, he would have questioned himself, would the Prophet ﷺ or would the Imam do such an action? If yes, they would have performed such an action, then he would go ahead and perform it. And I will bring examples, inshallah. That's the second factor. The third factor, which is very important, is building his relationship between himself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To the extent that you don't have or you don't feel any barriers between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it, closer to the man than his jugular vein. To feel Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that much, that every action you are taking, you are feeling Him alone. Now this is just an introduction. I'll try to state the story and then relate it to this introduction that we gave. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as we stated before, left Medina upon hearing the news of Muawiyah's death. And when the governor of Medina tried to force him to give his allegiance to Yazid, Imam refused, and we said, we talked about the conversation he had with his brother Muhammad ibn Hanfiyah, then he left Medina towards Mecca. That was at the end of Rajab, in the year 60 after Hijrah. On 10th of Shahr Ramadan of the same year, while he was in Mecca, the first letter of the Kufians, got to the Imam Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And it was written by few of the most important companions and the heads of the Shia of Kufa. For example, Sulaiman ibn Nasr and Muslim ibn Awsaj and so on. Asking the Imam Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to come towards Kufa. Now, this was the first of many letters that the Imam received. To the extent that Imam had to reply back in a more action phase. So the letters he was exchanging, now it got to, and please remember this, that whatever is the religious duty of the Imam, he has to perform it. Even if the political sense or the political environment is not ready for it. The religious and ethical obligations always dictate on the Imam, and by the way that's a good lesson for us as well, dictates upon the Muslim, being the Imam of course that's a primary example, but it dictates upon the Muslim to do some actions that sometimes rationality does not possibly fit in there. Because the religious obligation is the primary source of information. And then the ethical obligation as well. So Imam had to send someone to represent him in Kufa. By the way, let's look at it from just that time's perspective. Kufa was the most important center of the Shia of Ali alayhi salam. It had the biggest number of Imam Ali's followers. It was one of the most important cities in the Muslim world, and the most importantly, it was the capital of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So it had a special connection to Ahlul Bayt and a special experience with Ahlul Bayt. It was the only city that was ruled by them after Medina. So he had to choose someone that when he arrived in Kufa, he would represent the image of Imam Ali alayhi salam in action. He had to remind them of the personality and characteristics of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Please try to focus on this to see how great Muslim al-Aqil is and why Imam chose him. There were people that have lived under Ali alayhi salam for 5 years. So they knew every aspect of his life. Then Imam Sallallahu Alaihi chose Muslim al-Aqil. And he wrote in his letter to the people of Kufa, I have sent to you Akhi, my brother. And the Imam, when he describes someone as Akhi, it's not just an emotional attachment. There is more meaning to that. وَابْنَ عَمِّي, which is obviously, he was his first cousin. وَثِقَتِي مِنْ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي, and the most trusted of my family. The most trusted by the Imam. We're not talking about an infallible person, by the way. We're talking about someone who acquired this level of trust by the most infallible man in that time. He acquired that through what? We will look at it through action that he did later. Because as we all know, action speaks louder than words. So Imam sent Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil arrived in Kufa. By the way, Imam sent Muslim ibn Aqil alone. Yes, he had two guides, and some historians say the two guides died on the way, but they were just guides to show him where the way, basically in the desert, to get to Kufa. Anyway, he got to Kufa alone. So Imam Salamullahi alayhi, one, Kufa being the most important city that he would have aimed to achieve. Two, he was supposed to take the allegiance of the Kufians and make sure to advise the Imam should he actually make his way to Kufa or not. And three, he was supposed to lead the companions and the most important personalities in Islam who were living in Kufa. So this man had to be an army. Imam sent him alone to do all these duties. What sort of man, what sort of capabilities this man had? So he arrived in Kufa. And obviously, as we all unfortunately know, people gathered around him. Thousands upon thousands. The least estimate gives 18,000 people gave allegiance to die for his cause. Allegiance, by the way, when we say it, it's not like, oh, I'm going to come here and say, look, I like you, I'll follow you, next time when you have something, give me a buzz. It's not like that. It's actually giving all yourself, and that's why Imam couldn't give that to Yazid. It's giving all yourself to the rule of that man. When you say yourself, your own family, and your wealth to that man. So you following him, and we're not talking about taqleed here. We're talking about following him in absolute sense, by which we can't in Islam except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who he has directly appointed. Anyway, so a Muslim got the allegiance of these thousands upon thousands of people. They supposedly to follow him. At that time, the governor of Kufa, this is the first story I want to say. And inshallah, one by one, we see the character of this person. And how did he achieve these great characteristics? The governor of Kufa was Nu'man ibn al-Bashir. He had only 20 soldiers in his palace. That's about it. We said that Muslim ibn Aqil had 18,000 men. That's not including their families and their tribes and so on. 18,000 men, respectful men. And by the way, each man of Kufians had his own slaves and so on, and his followers, and big, huge family, and his sons and cousins and so on. So, Nu'man ibn Bashir, the heads of Bani Umayyah in Kufa, including, for example, Umar ibn Sa'd and so on, came to Nu'man ibn Bashir and said, look, Muslim ibn Aqil, thousands of people are giving him allegiance. He can, within 1 hour, take over the palace and Iraq is gone. What are you doing? He replied very nicely and said, this man came alone. He's seeking religion. He's not seeking this world. And I'm not afraid of man who seeks Allah. he had that much principle, and that's how much he knew, everyone knew about how principled man he was, that his enemy didn't fear him anymore, because he knew that he had a code of conduct that won't allow him to attack a man with 20 soldiers. And he knew that Muslim didn't come for troublemaking, and he knew that Muslim would not revolt against him. What sort of man this guy was? And how did he give, alright, when we talk about the Imam, alright, the Imam and everyone knew it, and spiritual guy, we're talking about a normal, ordinary man, who, yes, of course, has lived in the Prophet's household. Yes, of course, he has seen Ali alayhi salam in action. Yes, of course, he lived under the banner of his father, who was the brother of Imam Ali. He lived with Hassan and Hussein. But at the end of the day, he's a man like me and you. That's one story. The second story happened after the news arrived to Yazid with the letters of the Umayyads in Kufa that you either fix the problem in Kufa or Kufa's gone. So he ordered Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who was the governor of Basra, to move from Basra to Kufa and take Kufa back from the followers of Ahlul Bayt. By the way, when I'm saying take it back, they weren't rolling it. The roll was still with Yazid, but it was only for precautions measures. So Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad arrived. I'm not going to go into the story how he arrived and how he tricked people. That's not part of our discussion. By the way, just to note that Muslim Aqil was in the house of Mukhtar, and possibly most of you know Mukhtar, who later revolted to seek revenge of Imam alayhi salam. He was in the house of Mukhtar, one of the most known figures of that time, and one of the bravest men of Arabs. When Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad arrived, he left the house of Mukhtar and went to house of Khalid ibn Urwa. A public announcement to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad that I will not be revolting. As simple as that. Because Mukhtar was known to be a man of action, where Khalid ibn Urwa was known to be a man of logic and knowledge and a scholar. Another action from him to indicate, look, we're not here to make trouble. Some historians say Khalid ibn Urwa got sick. Some historians say that another Sharik was king from Basra, and he was a friend of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. Anyhow, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad gave the news to Khalid ibn Urwa that I will come tonight to visit you, being the new governor, and Khalid ibn Urwa being one of the most important figures of Kufa. Khalid ibn Urwa, or the other man, that's not of major concern, told Muslim Aqil, I have a plan. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad doesn't know you're here. You hide behind the curtain, and when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad sits down, of course, at that time, with the manners of the Arabs, when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad visits someone, when he enters the house, he would not enter with his weapon and men and bodyguards. He would come respectfully and sit, because why? He is a friend and he is coming with peace. So when he comes and sits in my house and I see the environment ready for you, I will call for water. You jump in and strike him with the sword, and everything finished. Yazid had only one man who could rule Iraq, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. We kill him, done. The problem is gone. The threat on Imam's life is gone. The threat on Islam is gone. Umayyads is gone. You see the consequences of this action. If you look at it from a political sense, as well as from a religious sense, you would see, yes, I'll save Imam's life, I'll save Islam, I'll save Allah's way, and I will be not doing anything possibly that's wrong. I'm just killing a man who deserves to die. He's murdered hundreds upon possibly thousands of people. So Han ibn Urwa goes behind the curtain. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad comes to visit. They're sitting and talking. Hani yells, "I'm thirsty, give me water." Nothing is happening. "I'm thirsty, give me water." Nothing is happening. He then recites the poetry that basically says, look, even if you want to kill me, just give me water. Trying to say, look, even if you kill me with him, just kill him. And yet, nothing. So the minister and the aide of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who came within him into the house, noticed that there is something not normal happening. Like, alright, you're sick and you want water, but not to this extent, So he grabs Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and they leave. Hani gets very frustrated, very upset. He says, "Muslim, he was just 1 meter from you, a strike of a sword, and you saved thousands of people. You saved the life of your Imam, you saved Islam, you saved humanity in many other senses." What Muslim replied? He said, "I have heard my beloved Muhammad that he said, Al-Imanu qaydul fatk." Faith is a barrier for any action. The end does not justify the means. In simple terms, I could not do it. The ethics that Muslim had were beyond the comprehension of his followers, unfortunately. That's why we have to learn from these ethics and actually see, yes, we criticize the people of that time and that era. Why they didn't help Imam Hussein? And we always say it. Oh, these people, they died for Imam Hussein, they stood for him, they lost their life, their families, their wealth, everything they had in this world for the sake of the truth. And we always wish that we were in their position to do the same thing. But would we? Would we? And that's the biggest question that we have to ask ourselves. Anyway, the days went by, and Muslim eventually was left alone. On the last day of his life, he walked in Kufa with 10,000 men with drawn swords at his command. By the fall of the night, he was alone, walking the streets of Kufa, thirsty, hungry, without refuge. The only one who helped him was an old lady. Kufa, the capital of Ahlul Bayt, the capital of Ali, that most of its inhabitants at least had seen Ali alayhi salam, if they weren't devotee followers of him. For the only messenger of Ahlul Bayt was a strange place. And by the end of that night, with the break of dawn, he had to face the enemy. There was a battle, and he fought bravely until they made him a trap. And eventually they took him to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. I want to talk about this incident, and I will end with this, inshallah, about Muslim, and then I'll relate it to Imam Hussein and finish the talk tonight. When Muslim was facing Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, there was a conversation between them. For the sake of being brief, I won't go into details. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad noticed that Umar ibn Sa'd was sitting in the court of Muslim ibn Aqil noticed that Umar ibn Sa'd was sitting in the court of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He told him, Umar, there is a blood relation between me and you. Can I give my will to you? Umar didn't react. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad looked at Umar and said, respect your blood relative. Go, see what he wants. They went aside, and I'm talking about the intention of the person and their action and what it would lead to. Please concentrate here. Umar ibn Sa'd and Muslim go on the side of the court. Muslim tells him, I have 3 requests from you. 1, I have, I think, 700 dinars or something that some people in Kufa have borrowed from them because I run out of money. So please, can you arrange for someone to get them from my wealth in Medina and give it to them? That's 1. The second request is, can you, when I'm killed, bury me in an Islamic way and don't allow them to do whatever they want to my body? And thirdly, can you write a letter to Hussein to tell him to go back? He has no followers. And if you don't do the rest of the 3, just do this one. Umar ibn Sa'd comes to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and tells him the secret that Muslim has confided in him. Umar ibn Sa'd goes, paying his debt, I don't care about it. It's a matter between you and him. His body, we own it. He doesn't own it. We will do whatever we want with it. Writing to Hussein, that will not happen. Umar ibn Sa'd could not keep a promise to a man who was dying without any guilt. And that's what actually was the foundations for the evil and the goodness that we create within ourselves. That's why Umar ibn Sa'd, on the other hand, we're talking about 2 individuals here, and compare them please. Umar ibn Sa'd, on the other hand, when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad ordered him to lead the army to go kill Hussein, he questions himself and says, should I leave the kingdom of Ray and it's my desire, or should I go to hell by killing Hussein? He questions himself. He doubts his ethics. And he says, I will go to the hellfire by killing Hussein. So he knows the consequences of his actions. Yet, he did it. So that's the effects of upbringing. That's the effects of having a role model in our lives. And that's the effect of always seeking to perform our best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all to His right path, that we follow the right role models and apply their lives in our lives. Thank you very much. Wa sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.